Tonight we are continuing our study in Psalms and continuing the study of Psalms that David did not write. Tonight we are in Psalm 90, the 90th Psalm. And of all people, other than David to have written a psalm, Psalm 90 is a psalm of Moses. It is the only psalm credited to Moses. Per se, there are some people who would suggest that he actually wrote the next 10 psalms. I'm not going to go there tonight. But Psalm 90 is one that is credited to Moses. And when this class came up and the opportunity to teach came up, I jumped on this one because this has been one of my favorite psalms, if not my favorite psalm, for a long time. This is a very Ecclesiastes style psalm, and yet, as with every other text that you study, you find out how little you know once you really start looking into it. So I invite you to participate in our discussion tonight. There is a lot here. This is a deep subject. Like our Ecclesiastes class, we're talking about the search for the meaning of life. And it's so interesting to get to see the mindset of Moses and what he's thinking as he writes this song. And most scholars do agree that Moses perhaps, no one knows, but perhaps wrote this psalm during the time of Numbers chapter 20. And so a lot of how I would suggest to look, the lens to look at Psalm 90 would be in the lens of the book of Numbers, but especially Numbers chapter 20. And of course, the story of Numbers is the story of the children of Israel who have been led out of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. They're marching to Canaan's land. And of course, despite Mount Sinai and the law being given to them and the Lord's provision, the pillar of cloud by day, the pillar of fire by night, they obviously encounter a lot of speed bumps along the way. And by the time we come to Numbers chapter 20, that is a pretty somber chapter. Because in Numbers chapter 20, Miriam, Moses' sister, dies. We have Aaron, Moses' brother, who dies. We have the incident of the waters at Meribah, where Moses gets cursed by, or not cursed, but he gets told by God that he's not going to see the children of Israel through to the land of Canaan. And so if you have that in your mind, and that we're in the wilderness wandering, and here we have Moses, who has been wandering for all this time, and we come to Psalm 90, and this perhaps is what he is thinking, and some things that would be present at the forefront of his mind, trying to lead Israel to Canaan as best he can, pleading with God to have mercy on Israel, Israelites who have been rebellious, stubborn, hard-hearted in every sort of way. And so with that, we come to Psalm 90. There are essentially, at least for the study tonight, 3 sections that I would suggest for this psalm, for our study tonight. The first would be verses 1 through 6. And then we have verses 7 to 11. And then we have 12 to the end of the chapter. The first and the last part, I think, is what I've always thought about when I think of Psalm 90. And it's this, man, we don't have long, it's Ecclesiastes, just make the best, do what you can. But really the meat, that verses 7 to 11 is really maybe a stronger message and maybe really what this whole psalm is trying to tell us. So as we get into it here, I'll go ahead and just read through it, and then we'll come back to the first section so we can get it all in one shot to have some context here. Psalm 90. Lord, you have been our dwelling place in all generations. Before the mountains were brought forth, or ever you had formed the earth and the world, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. You return man to dust, and say, Return, O children of man. For 1,000 years in your sight are but as yesterday when it has passed, or as a watch in the night. You sweep them away as with a flood. They are like a dream, like grass that is renewed in the morning. In the morning it flourishes and is renewed, and in the evening it fades and withers. For we are brought to an end by your anger. By your wrath we are dismayed. You have set our iniquities before you, our secret sins in the light of your presence. For all our days pass away under your wrath. We bring our years to an end like a sigh. The years of our life are 70, or by reason of strength 80. Yet their span is but toil and trouble. They are soon gone, and we fly away. Who considers the power of your anger, and your wrath according to the fear of you? So teach us to number our days, that we may get a heart of wisdom. Return, O Lord, how long? Have pity on your servants. Satisfy us in the morning with your steadfast love, that we may rejoice and be glad all our days. Make us glad for as many days as you have afflicted us, and for as many years as we have seen evil. Let your works be shown to your servants, your glorious power to their children. Let the favor of the Lord our God be upon us, and establish the work of our hands. Yes, establish the work of our hands. Okay. Moses begins here. Lord, you have been our dwelling place in all generations. Before the mountains were brought forth, or before the mountains were born. I like thinking of born rather than brought forth, because the idea of birth is really fitting for this psalm. We're talking about life and death and the hereafter. Before the mountains were born, or ever you had formed the earth and the world, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. What do these first couple verses make you think of? What comes to mind when you hear, you have been our dwelling place in all generations, before the mountains were born? What does that make you think of?
Are you thinking creation, or are you thinking
Creation? Yeah, we're talking about the eternal God. Okay? When we go to San Diego and we fly over the Southwest, and as far as you can see, from 39,000 feet in the air, as far as you can see on a clear day, there's nothing but dirt and rock in every direction for hours in a plane, going very fast, uncomfortably fast for me. And when I think of a mountain in the middle of the desert in New Mexico, I just think, what could be any older than this? This rock that just seems to be immovable forever. You know, there's the phrase that you've heard all your life, but old so-and-so, he's as old as the hills. Well, there was a time before those hills were there. There was a time before that rock and that dirt was there. But yet all this time, before and after the mountains, God, and the word there is Adonai in the Hebrew, which means authority, ruler of my life. It's a very formal way of stating God's authority over Moses' life. God, you have been our dwelling place in all generations. That's an encouraging thought to me. It's a motivating thought for me. And you think about how many Christians that you've known in your life. when you were a child, the old timers, their grandparents, for all of time, Moses' parents, for all of time, God has been a refuge for his people. A place where his people could seek to dwell, looking, depending on God for life and everything. And God's not going to change that with us. Before the mountains were born, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. You return man to dust and say, return, O children of man. Where do you think that verse 3 is quoted from? What does that remind you of? Man returning to dust. Somebody said it. Genesis. It's easy to remember. Verse 3, Genesis 3. Genesis 3:19. Moses was well versed in Genesis 3:19. He was well aware of the curse because he wrote Genesis. And so we see already from the outset here, juxtaposed in the first 3 verses, the eternal God, God who is rooted in eternity, from everlasting to everlasting, compared to man returning to dust. But man returning to dust in Genesis 3:19 because of why? Sin. It was part of the curse, the fall of man, the Garden of Eden. So, from the outset here, Moses is hearkening back in this psalm to remind us of the curse in the garden and why we will return to dust. It's not because humans, by nature, that's just what they do. It's because of sin. It's a consequence of the sin of the garden. Verse 4, for 1,000 years in your sight are but as yesterday when it has passed, or as a watch in the night. You sweep them away as with a flood. They are like a dream. How does that make you feel about this back half of your week? Things that you're planning on in your life, your timetable for even your whole life, things you're trying to accomplish, and how that compares to the eternity of God. Our lives are not insignificant, but yet, compared to God, it's just a drop in the bucket. God sweeps them the years away as with a flood. They're like a dream. Our lives are like a dream. And merrily, merrily, down the way we go. Life is but a dream. And that's really the way that it is. Yes, sir?
This verse 5 is really making me think of, it's important to remember that in no way is God restricted by the laws of our time.
That's right.
Or however you want to say it, time stream or whatever. He made it. He is outside of it. He
That's right.
controls that. That verse, I think, really.
Absolutely. That's a great point. God is not bound by time. He created time. And it's hard to grasp that concept because everything that we do in our lives, we think of on a timetable. And it's hard to think of that being removed. And God simply being. God simply is. When God appeared to Moses in the burning bush, and Moses said, well, who should I tell Pharaoh that is sending me? He said, I am who I am. I just am. You tell him that I am. And that's hard to wrap our head around sometimes. In verse 5, like grass that is renewed in the morning. In the morning it flourishes and is renewed, and in the evening it fades and withers. Does that remind you of anything we've been talking about in our Sunday morning studies in Ecclesiastes? These seasons of our lives. I think Barry mentioned waves on Sunday morning. The tide goes out, the tide comes in. Grass that is renewed in the morning, it flourishes.
It's a comparison to our lives. Our lives, we start out all full of vigor, and that's what the grass is in the morning, and then by eating the salt, just like we fade away from dust.
That's right. That's right. And Moses and the Israelites wandering through the wilderness, they were intimately familiar with the landscape of the wilderness. And they would see the desert plants that maybe through the cool of the evening and in the morning they were doing all right. But then by the time the end of the day comes and the sun bearing down on it, it looks about like some plants in our backyard, trying to make it through August and September. But that's life. Yes, sir.
I was thinking about a military person when he's on watch. And if nothing happens, and when they change shift, he said, well, what was it like? He says, it was nothing. I think that's what he's saying. It's just like your past days. It'd be like nothing happened at all. No matter how good or bad it was for you, it'd be like nothing.
That's right. It's, again, Ecclesiastes is going to come up maybe a lot tonight, but that vanity of vanities. You know, we talk about vapor, that the idea of smoke, it just disappears to nothing. Yes, sir.
It made me think of it shows that our lives are so finite. We're essentially dirt. You can very easily think of it that way, and yet at the same time, while we are essentially dirt, God in His love still decides to give us everything, essentially.
And that is true as far as our physical nature. But praise God, we are more than dirt. We are body, mind, and spirit, just as God is spirit. And so, the seasons of life, they come and they go, not in our control. I can't do anything to prolong any flourishing in my life as much as I could help the grass in my yard. You know, my birthday was a month ago or so, and I turned 38. And I remember years ago, maybe 10 years ago, my dad told me, he said, man, I tell you, the best year of my life, physical health, peak of my life, I was 38 years old. And I remember thinking all these years leading up to it, like, man, that's my year, and now it's here, but it's about to go. It's going to be going real quick, but that's life. That's the nature of our existence. And then we come to verse 7. For we, Moses lumping himself in with the children of Israel, I would suggest, we are brought to an end by your anger. By your wrath we are dismayed. You have set our iniquities before you, our secret sins in the light of your presence. That verse 7, those first 6 verses is kind of this big picture, brevity of life, the eternal God. But then we come to verse 7, and we're already reminded of the curse. And then verse 7, it says, we're brought to an end by your anger. What does that make you? What do you think about verse 7?
I guess I'm reminded of these 40 years wandering in the wilderness. I just looked up. If you just count the men that are listed in Numbers 1 for every day in the 40 years, that's like 40 funerals a day.
Yeah.
So it's not surprising that Moses has these things on his mind when daily he's watching 40 men die out here in the wilderness.
Yes. Yes. The route to Canaan, wandering through the wilderness up out of Egypt, left a trail of dead Israelites. And that's just the facts. That's just the way that it was. But we're brought to an end by your anger. I had to think about that for a long time. I'll let y'all answer. What do you think about the anger of God? What does that have to do with the brevity of our lives? Josh.
What verse 7 and 8 is telling me is that I'm a mediator. I can't come before God. God is so holy that He's just angry at the sin that I've committed, and I'm the mediator to work in between, to be on my behalf. I can't plead on my own. I need somebody stronger to plead for me.
That's right. You bring up a good point, Josh. The anger of God is holy. And so God's anger is an outworking of His judgment against sin. Because if God didn't do something about sin, He wouldn't be holy. And we'd have a problem. So for the holy God, in the midst, looking down on a sinful people, He has no choice but to dispense justice as He sees fit. By your wrath we are dismayed or troubled. You have set Moses doesn't say there, the humility, the meekness of Moses, the meekest man who's ever lived. You have set our iniquities before you, our secret sins in the light of your presence. What do you think about secret sins? Context of the wilderness wanderings, context of our lives today.
Yeah, it reminds me of in other places where it talks about the fact that when Israelites left Egypt, that they hid their idols.
Yes.
Little pocket gods that they brought along with them.
Yes.
This seems like a reference to that.
Absolutely. It's a great mental image to help remind us. But yet, though they thought it was in secret, nothing obviously is in secret to this eternal, all-knowing, all-seeing God. Our secret sins in the light of your presence. Yes, sir.
The secret sins also be the desire to go back to Egypt.
Absolutely.
Because they coveted.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It's absolutely not just the idols. It's the darkness that we've all chosen and allowed to enter our hearts. This is true in the context of Psalm 90, but it's true in the context of our lives today. Do people have secret sins? Do we all have secret sins? Do I have secret sins today? And it's my problem. And God is holy, so I've got to do something about that. And thank God we have a cure for that. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Mara?
And that's coupled, the first line is iniquities before you, and iniquities are like high-handed sins, like open rebellion before you, and secret sins in the light of your presence. God is shining a light on the sins that we don't even know we're committing. There is David in the Psalms has talked about this, like when he was repenting, he's like, my iniquities and my secret sins. Mm-hmm. There's a difference there, and it can be like things we're hiding, God is bringing to light, but I think it's all my sins will be known.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up, Mara, because there is a difference. And that thought reminded me of the Spirit helping us pray, because we don't know how we ought to pray. We do our best, but there are things that we need help on. It's a great point. John?
I think there's a component to this that God is justified in His anger. He's not just angry because He's angry.
That's right.
He's angry because He sees exactly what us individually and collectively have done. He is thoroughly justified in His anger.
And why? Why is He angry? Other than He's holy, what would you say? I know you know.
Well, we chose to break the relationship with Him. He wanted it to be perfect.
There you go.
So,
What we love the most is what makes us angry. How I feel about the things in my life that I love the most. If my kids, we've had lunch duty a couple times, and every time I'm in a school, I just think about school shootings. That's all I think about. Love my kids, and I can't stand, this world is sick and twisted, but it's always been, and it's not any worse today than it's ever been. I'm not saying that. But the evil of the world, if someone hurt my child, it's going to produce anger in me because I love my child that much. It's simple, but it's pretty complex. And as John said, God loves us. God, the only reason that this earth is here is because God desired to have a people and loved us so much always in all generations. But the flip side of God's love is his anger. And it's a natural consequence of his affection for us. Does that make sense? He continues on. For all our days pass away under your wrath. We bring our years to an end like a sigh. The years of our life are 70, or even by reason of strength 80. Yet their span is but toil and trouble, or labor and sorrow, as other translations say. They are soon gone, and we fly away. What do you think about those verses there? What comes to mind? Yes, ma'am.
Contrast to the eternal nature of God in the beginning.
Absolutely. What is 70 or 80 years compared to God? My brother told me that every Simpson man in our family for like 400 years has died when they were 79 years old. I don't know how he knows this stuff, but my days are numbered. I may make it 70, I may not make it tonight, but our days are numbered. And again, as you said there, it's this contrast, the eternal nature of God and our lives, which are so brief. And as we've been studying in Deuteronomy, our lives are filled with toil and trouble. And if we keep it in Moses' day, wandering is what Moses has known. And it's toil and trouble, labor and sorrow, but not forever. Because one day, this will all be gone, and we'll fly away. And the more I've thought about it, that fly away may be more like what Mr. Wayne had talked about, this vanity, this idea of vapor, that's smoke in the wind. I'd always thought about the song, I'll fly away, oh glory. And I've always thought, maybe, are we really going to fly away? But I don't know that that's the idea, but I could be wrong. I'll digress on that. And we fly away. Verse 11, who considers the power of your anger and your wrath according to the fear of you? Any comments on this section? Josh?
To me, it's frightening to me when I committed a sin and then God's mercy. It just blows my mind that His mercy could be extended, even though He's so great, so holy, and just judge, that He would even save me. So it's so hard to comprehend all of that.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it just blows my mind every day.
Verses 7 to 11 is, for me, a reality check at the hardness of life. And yet, as we come into verse 12, life is hard. We know that. We see it every day. We're living it. But there are some people, and maybe us if we're not careful, who could realize how hard life is, but be pushed in some other direction other than God. And that's when we get into verse 12. And verse 12 is the verse of Psalm 90. If you tell anybody that you talked about Psalm 90, they will quote this verse. I had it happen. This is the refrigerator Bible verse, and it's a really good one. Verse 12. So teach us to number our days, that we may get a heart of wisdom. What are your thoughts on that verse? Yes, sir.
Makes me think of what Paul says in Ephesians: the days are evil. Your time is short, and your mission is urgent. You have things to do. You cannot be idle.
Absolutely. We have a purpose.
I've heard it said that if you live aware, let me see if I can remember. If you live with dying thoughts, you die with living hope.
That's a great statement. I have to write that down.
This verse speaks to that. We number our days. You realize you are coming. Your days are numbered. You will have an end.
Yeah.
And I think of the verse that Paul says that today is the day.
Yes. Your day of visitation.
Yeah, visitation.
Teach us to number our days. We just studied Ecclesiastes 7. And Ms. Belinda?
Christian Standard Bible uses the term value, which introduces instead of number, which I don't think that takes away from the numbering. He's been talking about the 70 and 80 years.
Right.
But it almost adds a different idea to it.
Absolutely.
The value of those days we have are even more because they are so limited.
Yeah, this is not just being asked to numerically count our days. This is Ecclesiastes 7. This is, lay this to heart, that all these things that we've talked about so far in Psalm 90 are factual. This is what it is, and there is no other way. But lay this to heart and let these truths of the eternal nature of God, the brevity of our lives, let these truths sink in and push us, lead us to desire to gain wisdom, godly wisdom. And I really think that's what he is getting at here, because some people, there are people in the world who understand that life is short, but that you could take that a whole other direction. Well, my life is short, so I'm going to go do, whatever. But that's foolishness. All through the Bible, and especially this wisdom literature of the Bible, this section here, the Ecclesiastes and Proverbs, and through the Psalms, we're talking about two paths: wisdom and folly. Teach us to number our days, that we may get a heart of wisdom. Illumine us to the fact that we are yours, you created us, and that at the end of our lives, at the end of every one of our lives, there will be the eternal God. And that's the truth. Any other comments on that section?
And the event in Moses' life that he may be looking back on now is when God commanded him to speak to the rock. And he was angry at the people. And he let that anger make it where he didn't carefully consider what God had told him to do. So I wonder about the heart of wisdom, knowing that he's coming to the end of his road. he's told, you're not going to go in.
Yep.
He's thinking about the end for himself and how it actually cut his life short because he didn't carefully consider what God had told him to do. And that's a big message.
That's a great point. Moses knows that he's an old man, that he's not going to live forever. My word, Moses has seen, as Michael had mentioned, how many instances of the wrath of God. He saw the plagues in Egypt. He saw the Egyptian army washed out in the Red Sea. He's Korah's rebellion. The earth split open and swallowed the sons of Korah. I mean, man alive. I mean, if there's anybody that has seen firsthand the truth of how brief our life is, the seriousness of all of this, it would be Moses. And Moses is a man who has been told that he is not going to get to enter into Canaan's land because of his sin, and it's almost like he's on death row. You know, he knows that his day is coming. He's just wandering. That's all he knows. But he's looking to God. Day to day, step to step, moment to moment, looking to where he's going to lead him next. But he doesn't know when his time is going to come. You know, people on death row, they don't tell them when their day is. Can you imagine? It's horrible. But it doesn't have to be miserable for us, because we have a teacher. God, through His Spirit, through His Word, Jesus, the teacher. And especially if you look at it, Moses didn't get to see the establishment of the kingdom of Israel. Moses didn't get to read about or hear about the story of David and Goliath. He never got to see Solomon's temple. Moses didn't know about Jesus, perhaps. All he knew was wandering. So how much more should we have hope? We have it all. We have things that the Bible tells us that angels long to see in 1 Peter. Jesus said that prophets and kings have longed to see the things that you've seen and to hear the things that you've heard. We have such a privilege of hindsight. We have the greatest teacher who has ever lived, God Himself in the flesh, in all of the entirety of Scripture, who has taught us this exactly what we need to gain out of Psalm 90 and verse 12. Jesus, who taught us that man doesn't live by bread alone, who taught us that life doesn't consist of the abundance of things that we have. And on we go. And Jesus, who teaches us to gain a heart of wisdom and what that looks like. And in fact, Jesus is our wisdom. Verse 13, return, O Lord, how long? Have pity on your servants. Satisfy us in the morning with your steadfast love, that we may rejoice and be glad all our days. You know, that return, O Lord, how long? I know people, I used to work for a guy that he would just say, I am just ready for Jesus to come. He was beat up by life and different things, and he was half joking, but he's like, I'm just, any day now He's going to come, and I can't wait. But that's Moses is saying, how long? Have pity. Lord, have mercy. In verse 14, help us to turn a new leaf in the morning. Satisfy us with your steadfast love. We've talked about satisfaction in Ecclesiastes. This psalm actually predates Ecclesiastes by several hundred years, but you can tell that the flavor of Ecclesiastes, they had known, the preacher Koheleth had known something of Psalm 90, most likely. That we may rejoice and be glad all our days. Make us glad for as many days as you have afflicted us, for as many years as we have seen evil. Michael?
I just imagine being one of those Israelites that's wandering those 40 years. And kind of people on like death row, like, what am I living for here? And I think this is a pretty powerful point that Moses is making. Like, there's still joy that can be had in the numbering of your days. And God can still be with you, even though his anger has swept you away, you will die in his wilderness. That doesn't mean that he can't still be your dwelling place. Back to verse 1. He can't still be the source of your joy.
Absolutely. We still have a purpose. Even though Moses is an old man, all of his support group around him, I think of Aaron, his brother, passing away, and that's who God sent with him to confront Pharaoh. Well, he's gone now. But yet Moses is like, I still have work to do. And he talks about that in these last few verses. But he's saying in verse 15, Lord, give us some good days. Give us some good years to balance out all of the bad that we've had. And I think we can all relate to that. Franco?
The word affliction is used, and even before when you look at, in Exodus, Numbers, it's used as a way to humble.
Mm-hmm.
It's not there just to torture.
Yep.
Because to humble us, so that they could be, and for Israel, to humble them so that they would draw their eyes back to God.
That's right. That's right. It's a great point. God's not doing this to be mean and malicious. He let the Israelites hunger and thirst to try to turn their hearts back to Him. Moses has pleaded that the Israelites would turn their hearts to God and pleaded that God would have mercy on them. It's a great point. And that's really the message of Numbers. It's that in spite of our own sin, God still loves us. He wants us to change, but He's not going to break His covenant that He's made to His people. He's always there, waiting on us to turn. Yes, ma'am.
What we're talking about now, like from verse 14 on, seems to me to reflect back to verse 12 where it says that we may get a heart of wisdom.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The heart of wisdom. And he concludes, let your work be shown to your servants and your glorious power to their children. Let the favor of the Lord our God be upon us, and establish the work of our hands upon us. Yes, establish the work of our hands. What sort of work do you think that he's talking about here? I think he's talking about our jobs. What sort of work could we hope that God establishes in us as His people?
Verse 16 shows it's God's work. Let your work be shown.
That's right. That's right. That our work would be your work and vice versa. Your concerns would be our concerns. To spread the gospel. And to turn as many hearts as we can back to God. And I thought it might be fitting to conclude with the blessing of Numbers, because it seems to tie in. Numbers chapter 6. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make His face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up His countenance upon you and give you peace. And we can have peace. Appreciate y'all's comments and attention tonight.